Parshas Re'eh. We're starting with Parshas Re'eh, and we're starting with sunrise. Because, as we all know, I've just been away for a week. Missed last week's Parshas, so we're going to have to quickly go through what we missed last week. But I thought I would take you on a quick tour of what we saw, because it kind of does relate to some degree, because that is the view from our apartment, almost at the top of the hill. It was a nice long 300-meter walk uphill, but it was incredible, and that's the view we woke up to on the very first morning. So I thought, let's just show that. That's Eli Beach. Oh, yeah. This is the Eli Beach Harbour, and yeah, it doesn't obviously capture the colors of the ocean, but I will show you that in a moment. It's just, that is Whitehaven Beach. Whitehaven Beach has been nominated and voted the #1 beach in the world many, many times. The sand keeps moving. This is up from the top. The sand keeps moving. It's silica, and so it is pure white sand. It is incredible. You walk on it, it's just absolutely magnificent, with these beautiful turquoise waters, different colors, with manta rays floating around down there.
It looks like it's going into the water.
The clouds?
Yeah.
No, that's the beach. Yeah, that's the beach. The beach moves. So there's different beaches. That there is Whitehaven Beach itself. Yeah. We went down to a beach down here, but we climbed up on the top of the hill. I think I will jump. Let's just go through the pictures first. I've only got 4 or so. That there just is from the top of Eli Beach, just down. These are the islands here, are the Whitsundays. There's 74 islands there with coral reefs around, a lot of them, with accommodation in some of them. But that's just this town of Eli Beach. So we climbed up that on Friday. It was a nice 4-hour walk up and down. Beautiful. And then that was sunset on the same day. So we left sunrise, we came, I left after sunrise, but sunrise and sunset. So that was our trip. Now I'll show you one more thing, because it does relate to this week's Parsha. Now you're going to have to watch, maybe listen, but just keep your eyes peeled. We'll go back to beginning. It's only a 30-second video.
Wow.
The southern humpback whales. The southern humpback whales are up there at the moment because it's the annual breeding season, and there are hundreds of them. I mean, we would have seen, on the one day we saw about 12. On the next day we saw about 7 or 8, but that one was close. It was about 30 meters away. We saw coming out in the air lots and lots of sprays. One of them, with their tail going up and down, was probably about 50 meters away. It was the most incredible thing.
How big are they?
Up to 18 meters.
18?
Yes, massive animals. Yep, and they're there for breeding. They come up from the Antarctic. They come up for breeding. The other interesting thing, just while we're talking about where we were, the Great Barrier Reef is about 2,500 kilometers long of reefs. Every year in November, they have a thing where the reef spawns, and they have this most incredible thing that happens simultaneously on the same day across this entire 2,500 kilometers, where the corals let off sperm and eggs, and they create new corals. It's a whole thing, and it all happens simultaneously. It's a thing that happens across the world at different times, but it always happens a few days after, I think, the full moon in November. And it's a coordinated thing that the corals do this every single year. And I mean, that just shows you how Hashem is completely in control of the world. That whale, a whale in Hebrew is Leviathan. Leviathan is this fabled animal, this mystical animal that Hashem created 2 of them, sea creature, and the whale is called that because it's such a big creature. It's a massive creature that we are going to sit in its skin when Mashiach comes at the end of time, whenever it might be. And so just to see these things is just incredible. Just to see the beauty of Hashem's world, that it's just beyond anything that we can imagine. And we just stop and think thank you, Hashem. We don't say a brocha on things like that. You see the ocean, there's a brocha to say, but you say, Oisei Maaseh Bereshis, Hashem who made these incredible things and created all of these things from nothing. That's what going on holiday is about. It's about seeing something in the world that has an impact on us, that can take our neshama to the next level. And so we missed Parshas Akev last week.
Nice. Did you go snorkeling?
We did. We went snorkeling twice. They talk about, let's anti-woke for the moment. They talk about how the reef is dying, etc. It is just absolutely magnificent. The reef off one of the islands, we went off Hook Island, the colors, it was unbelievable. Just the different corals, the fish. They showed us coral growing and how it grows on the outer reef that we went to. We went twice. And you can just see the growth of coral. Coral was decimated. There was a cyclone, I think it's called Cyclone Debbie, that came through in 2017 or thereabouts. It did destroy a lot of the coral, but it's come back and it's bouncing back. And there ain't no global warming and there ain't no climate change. Don't let anyone kid you. It's part of the natural way of the world. Simple as that.
One of the wonders of the world.
It is. The Great Barrier Reef is one of the 7 natural wonders of the world, and it really, really is. It is magnificent and well worth going. And if you do snorkel or scuba dive, it's even better.
Just snorkeling.
Yeah.
We did it from Haman.
Yes, so you can go off the islands there. It's just the most beautiful part of the world.
It's not as scary because snorkeling is you're just there.
You're on the surface, yeah. You can go down, which I do, but yeah. Okay, so let's talk Torah, because we missed last week's Parsha of Akev. I'm going to go through Akev in a couple of minutes just very quickly because we missed it. Akev discusses about a heel and the part of the body, those mitzvahs that we trample on, the mitzvahs that we disregard. It starts off, this is the reward for those mitzvahs that you should do. What's the reward for doing mitzvahs? More mitzvahs. Just, you get the ability to connect to Hashem. It's connecting to Hashem. We're assured that Hashem is there for us. We saw what happened in Egypt. We saw Hashem take control of the world, and that's what we need to know about. Food, the food that we get today. This week's Parsha, we're going to talk a lot about food, but the Parsha spoke about man and how man came and kept us going. It was the most incredible food. It was fully digested in the body. People who ate man did not need to go to the bathroom. It was just most perfect food. And our food, we need to treat it in that same way, because when we eat, we'll be satisfied. We learn the mitzvah of benching from that. That you need to realize that everything, just like the man came from Hashem, all of our food doesn't come from coals or from the farm. It comes from Hashem. And the money that we've got to buy that food comes from Hashem. And therefore, when we eat, we should always be thankful to Hashem and bench, because obviously when we eat bread, because everything comes from Hashem. But then we might become prosperous, and we become so prosperous that it's all on me. I am a self-made man. It's all me. We forget that everything comes from Hashem. So just be aware of those kind of things. The Parsha reminded us of the Exodus and the things that we went through, and Moshe Rabbeinu went through lots of the tribulations and trials and tests that we went through in the wilderness, where we were testing Hashem many times. He discusses from Parshas Beis where it discussed the Aseret Adibros and the whole Sinai experience. Moshe goes through and discusses the 3 periods of 40 days and 40 nights that he was on Sinai, the second tablets that he brought, that he had to hew out himself and take up to Hashem. Hashem carved the Aseret Adibros from which we learned in the previous week's Parsha. Then talks about that Hashem told him to make a temporary aron, temporary ark for the tablets, and that was the ark that used to be taken out into battle. The actual ark that Betzalel made that sat in the Mishkan stayed in the Mishkan. When they went out to battle, they would take the tablets with them in this temporary ark that Moshe made. He speaks about Aaron's death. He reminds him of Aaron's death, and then talks about the Levium and how they were elevated, and the Levium didn't get a possession in the land of Israel, which again we'll discuss in this week's Parsha. It flows into that. We know Hashem's miracles firsthand, and just by seeing some of the beauty of the world out there, we can realize Hashem's absolute miracles, that the sun comes up and the sun sets. That's a miracle in itself. Every single day, it says, Chazal tell us that Hashem recreates the world every single day. Yes, we might wake up knowing what we knew yesterday before we went to sleep, but we're a new person. Every day, our neshama goes a little bit away at night and comes back in the morning with new vigor and new life and everything new. And then discusses the land of Israel and the virtue of the land, which is what we'll focus on today in this week's Parsha. And finally, the Parsha ends with the second paragraph of the Shema, V'haya im Shamoya, that we should focus on remembering Hashem's mitzvahs and the reward and punishment for doing mitzvahs or for not doing them, and that the focus in this part of the Shema is about how Hashem provides physical things for us, and also discusses tefillin and mezuzahs. And that's really the Parshas Akev in a nutshell. So let's focus a little bit more on this week's Parsha, Ra'eh. Ra'eh anochi noisen lifnechem hayom bracha uklala. See, have a look. Look. The previous Parsha was a focus on Shema, to listen. This week's Parsha now focus on seeing, looking, an eyewitness. Be a witness that Hashem, what is Hashem going to do? Moshe tells us that he will present to us blessings and curses. When you cross over into Eretz Israel, you're going to go to Har Grizim and Har Eval, 2 mountains. And on those 2 mountains, half the tribes will be on one, half the tribes on the other. And there will be a series of blessings and of curses, which we're going to learn about in Kisavo in more detail. But it's giving us an introduction to that. Hashem says, don't follow the gods of others. Make sure that when Hashem brings you to the land that we're going to possess, that is going to be our land. He speaks about when you go on the other side of the Jordan, as far as the sunset, as far as you can see, the land of the Canaanite, from Gilgal to Moireh, to the plains of Moireh, that's the land that we're going to possess. That's the land that's given to the Jewish people. And the Torah then tells us again, Moshe says again, be careful, perform these mitzvahs, the decrees, the statutes that are presented to you before today. Moshe says again, make sure that you follow these halachas, whatever type of mitzvahs they are, because they are decrees and ordinances that need to observe in the land. The land of Israel itself is a sanctified land. And if we don't treat the land properly, it will spit us out. Simple as that. In other words, if we don't behave in a proper manner in Eretz Israel would not want us to be there. And if we look at what's happened over history, that's exactly the way the land has worked. Because the second temple was destroyed in the year 70. And between then, after the Romans defiled the entire land, took over, kicked out most of the Jews from the year soon after the Beitar revolt, all the way through till 100 or so years ago, 150 years ago, the land was completely desolate, swamps, deserts, non-fertile. There was very small-scale farming. But when we are there and we treat the land properly, the land treats us properly back. And we learn that with Shemitah. Shemitah's spoken about a little bit in this Parsha as well, that Hashem gives us mitzvahs to look after the land, to treat the land in a way that the land will treat us well in return. And that's really what mitzvahs are all about. Do the mitzvahs Hashem gives you, and Hashem will treat you back in a good way. Simple as that. Just by the way, these slides that I've got up here, I just ran some notes through them very, very quickly last night after we came back. And some haven't really proofread them properly, so if there's any mistakes or anything, they're all my fault. And there's quite a bit of writing on them, so don't focus on these slides. But really, what the Parsha is going to talk about is holiness, being a holy people, in geography, in the land itself, in the way we worship in the land, in the way we look at the economy. How do we deal with other people buying and selling? What do we do? Our body. How do we look after what goes into our body, essentially, in terms of food? And the agricultural cycle in terms of Shemitah, in terms of Maaseh, and taking and giving to others that are less fortunate than us. That's really a nutshell of the entire Parsha in one slide. Okay. The Parsha also discusses a number of times that the place that Hashem will show you, the chosen place, the place, it keeps referring to the place that I will show you, the place that I will show you. And we see that coming through the entire Parsha. We look at, now I'm just jumping through, towards the end of Rishon, The Parsha talks about bringing an offering. When you want to bring a private offering, there's halachas around how do we bring offerings. When the Jewish people came into the land of Israel, the Mishkan that we had, which was the temporary Mishkan, then spent a number of years in Gilgal with Yehoshua while they were conquering the land. At that point in time, you were allowed to bring offerings on what was called a bama, a small altar, private altar. When the Mishkan then moved to Shiloh for 369 years, it was now only offerings, all offerings had to be brought to Shiloh itself, to the Mishkan. And after that, after Mishkan Shiloh was destroyed, and they had temporary, Mishkan was temporary around for another 57 years, I think it was. Then again, Bamos were allowed, and you could bring offerings in a private setting. Private personal offerings could be brought to God, and then part of it was offered up to Hashem, and part of it was eaten. Once the temple was built by King Solomon, all private offerings in private settings finished, and all offerings had to now be brought in the temple, which is one of the reasons why today we are not allowed to bring an offering, because we don't have the temple. The whole discussion with whether we can bring the Pesach offering and other offerings without a temple, but that's not for now. It's a whole halachic dispute, and we don't bring offerings without the temple itself, because we need the temple being the center of the universe, the place where Hashem will show us to bring those offerings. And that's really a big focus of the entire Parsha. In Sheni, in the Parsha, Hashem says, it'll be that place where Hashem your God will choose to rest his name. There you shall bring everything that I command you, your elevation offerings, your feast offerings, your tithes that you raise up with your hand. That's again another reference to the place that Hashem will show you. Hashem gives us permission to eat certain offerings. If an offering gets a blemish, somebody offers up something to the temple and it becomes blemished, it gets replaced, and that offering is then redeemed and allowed to be eaten by the people who own it, or the Kohanim at various different situations. And so therefore, certain sacred foods are allowed to be eaten. The Torah follows soon after that and discusses, oh, by the way, if you want to eat meat, you may eat animals by slaughtering them in the appropriate manner, and then you're allowed to eat meat. It's an interesting discussion. Sfas Emes discusses this, that should we become completely accustomed to eating meat, that meat should be our primary diet, and every single day we come home expecting steak and chips and burgers and whatever else and fancy foods like that, or should we say no, let's keep meat for special occasions? Now in the shtetl, obviously, where people couldn't afford it, you might be lucky enough to have a piece of chicken or a chicken on Shabbos, or maybe at a wedding there was, they were able to shecht an animal, but it was very rare. Now that we are so well off in the world, meat's become this just normal thing. We'll go out and no problem having a fancy steak, big deal. It's just normal. Should we say, oh, let's slow down, let's take a step back and say, we don't need to eat meat all the time. I mean, maybe it's not so healthy anyway. But the Torah discusses that in a way that we are allowed to eat meat as long as we eat the meat correctly. In other words, the Torah discusses, don't eat blood, remove the blood, because blood is the life body of the animal. It's the soul of the animal. So therefore, we have the whole kashering process. When you slaughter an animal, make sure you slaughter the animal in a proper way, that it's properly supervised. I was reading something very interesting on Shabbos. I had a few articles that I'd taken up with me about why kosher meat is so much more expensive. And if you just think about all the steps needed to make an animal kosher, we can understand there's so many extra people involved and so much required to make sure, firstly, that the animal's killed in a way that is completely as pain-free as possible, the most pain-free manner possible. This idea that shooting a bolt into the animal's head or an electric thing before you slaughter it is better for the animal is counterintuitive, because that slaughtering, as soon as that knife, it is so sharp, as soon as it cuts the animal's well, if it's an animal, the two simonim, the throat and the windpipe and the food pipe, as soon as they are cut in an animal, the animal's dead. Yes, it might shake around a little bit, but that animal is, let's call it brain dead, and it's as pain-free as possible. If you start shooting bolts into its head beforehand, well, we don't know what the effect is. But, Western society says, no, we need to be more humane than the Torah is telling us. It does not quite work that way. The Torah is telling us the best way to slaughter animals. Let's just jump there. And so that's really what we were discussing, that blood is prohibited. When we take a piece of meat, we put salt on it to remove all the blood. We make sure that the blood is drained out. If it's part of an animal like the liver, it needs to be broiled and barbecued so that the blood is boiled out of it completely, because we do not eat blood. And which is the interesting thing, completely contrary to all of that, all of the blood libels that have happened throughout history, the last 2,000 years essentially, and still today we hear about them, where we use baby's blood to make matzah, of all things. I mean, matzah is flour and water only. Where that all comes from is just beyond normal understanding. But we're told, don't copy the ways of the rest of the world. The rest of the world, the Canaanite nations that you're going into, when Hashem your God will cut down the nations to which you come to take possession from them before you, you'll settle in the land. Beware lest you be attracted after them, and that they have been destroyed before you, and seek out their gods. Don't follow their ways. Don't follow their practices. They were kicked out of the land because they were so depraved and doing such terrible things in the land that the land could not hold them. If we behave in the manner that they behaved, the land will not be able to retain us. We need to be at peace with each other in order for the land to help us and to keep us there. Now, the next part, we're in Shlishi. Now, the next chapter, chapter 13, discusses a false prophet. And you might get a person that comes along that gives you a true sign and a wonder, and is a dreamer, and he dreams, and he tells you all these things, and, perhaps he can walk on water, or perhaps he can resuscitate the dead, or he can do these various things. But he tells you, don't follow Hashem, don't follow the Torah, because I'm this dreamer, I've got a new Torah for you. Do not follow that false prophet. And what happens to that person? He needs to be put to death, because he is leading people astray. Somebody who leads people astray, the Jewish people, does not deserve to be alive. And similarly, in a wayward city, a city that goes completely off, that city needs to be destroyed. Because if we're enticing other people to stray, or a city goes completely off, there is no way to come back. Once they get to a certain point where it's enough, then we need to make sure that that negativity in the world doesn't exist. And so the Torah focused quite a lot, several psukim, on these concepts, that somebody who comes to lead you astray, to bring you to say, no, the Torah has been abrogated, you don't need the Torah anymore, and I'm going to prove it to you because I can do these various different signs, don't fall for that.
Gary, while we're here, it's just dawned on me something. I believe there's a couple who are going around the houses saying they've been sent to help with the census. And
it's been shown as it's going around. There's a whole lot of this going around. Don't open your door to anybody. That's really just a hoax. But just don't open your door to anybody you don't know. Certainly do not give anybody personal information. But those messages that are going around have been flying around for a while.
Okay.
But certainly do not give personal information ever. But there will be people knocking your door about the census, and make sure you do fill in the census, and make sure to disclose that you are Jewish. Because really, you have to put. But other religions are listed there.
Every other.
Well, this is part of our country we live in.
I mean,
every little minor. Well, we need to know where we belong, and we're going to get to where we belong in a few minutes. Okay. We'll come to this in a moment. The Torah at Revi'i, just before talking about animals, discusses that Banim hatem la'Hashem Elokechem, You are children to Hashem your God. It then discusses don't cut yourself or make a bald spot between your eyes for a dead person. It was a practice in certain places whereby a person's relative passed away, they gash themselves and they pull out their hair, various things. The Torah says, no, you are Hashem's holy people. It carries on and says, so don't do that because Ki am kadosh ata laHashem elokecha, because you are a holy people to Hashem your God. We don't do these kind of things. We tear a garment, but we don't. Our body is our temple. At the end of the day, Hashem gave us our body to look after. We do not have permission to destroy our body in any way or shape or form. Yes, jewelry is acceptable. It's an acceptable way of doing things. It's not destroying the body. But we'll discuss in a few minutes actually one way that we're told in the Torah that certain people were told that certain parts of the body were going to be destroyed. A part of the body will be destroyed. We'll get to that in a few moments. But first we're going to talk about what the Torah calls Lo soichal kol to'eva. Don't eat any abomination. What is an abomination? It first says, don't eat any abomination. And then the Torah says, and this is a repeat of what we heard earlier about all the kosher animals and non-kosher animals and birds and fish. It says, okay, these are the animals you can eat. And it lists the ox, the sheep, the goat, the hart, the deer, yachmo. It doesn't translate. Generally, they don't translate all of these animals because we don't know exactly what they are. But then the Torah says the animals that you can eat are those that have got completely separated hooves, split hooves, and chew the cud. That you can eat. Those that you can't eat are ones that have one sign where they chew the cud but don't have split hooves. And the Torah mentions, translated here, as the camel, the hare, and the hyrax. Hyrax. It's like a rabbit type of animal, a small animal. They in some way chew their cud, but they don't have split hooves. So those animals are not kosher. We cannot eat them. They're unclean to you. The Torah says they're unclean. And then it says, and the pig, because it's got a split hoof, it's unclean to you, and you can't eat its flesh. The pig is the only animal that has got a split hoof, completely split hoof, that doesn't chew its cud. And what does the pig do? It sticks out its trotters and says, look, I'm kosher, come and eat me. And it's the one thing that across most of the Jewish world, through most of history, that no matter what people ate, the one thing that most people avoided was eating the pig. Because it's out there, it's saying, I'm kosher, look at me. And in some ways, it goes a little bit back to what we said about this false prophet that's going to come along. Look at me, I'm kosher, I'm telling you the right thing, I'm proving to you that I'm good, I've got split hooves, I'm proving to you that I can do these miracles. Don't fall for it. There's going to be times where somebody's going to come along and we're going to fall for it. Be careful. I mean, we know there are so many scams in our times. We just discussed potential scams and things. Just be careful. Don't fall for false prophets. Don't fall for the pigs of the world, so to speak. Not necessarily in terms of the way we understand the word pig, but just those negative forces that come along and try and show you that they are the right way of doing things. Be careful. The Torah then lists fish, water creatures that we're allowed to eat, and says you are only allowed to eat animals with fins and scales. Talks about fins and scales. Now, interesting enough, that whale that we saw, that has fins, but a whale does not have scales. Any fish that has scales will have fins. It doesn't necessarily work the other way around. So shark is not a kosher fish because it has fins, it doesn't have scales. Be aware of what is a kosher fish and what's not. And again, the Torah says, because these are not clean to you. And then the Torah lists the type of birds that we're not allowed to eat, and it lists all the kind of birds you're not allowed to eat. Again, it doesn't translate most of them. Most commentaries don't translate most of them because we don't know exactly what they are. But we know what birds we're allowed to eat, and we know the certain signs of a bird that we're allowed to eat. I don't want to go into too much detail because of time, and we've discussed this several times. And then it talks about swarming creatures that you're allowed to eat. every clean bird you may eat. And we have a tradition of what birds we can and can't eat. As we've discussed before, it's an interesting question how we can eat turkey, because the turkey is a bird from the Americas. We never ever had a tradition to eat the turkey, but because it is so similar to chicken and other fowl, and because it has all the signs of a kosher bird, it's acceptable to eat turkey, if you like turkey. It's acceptable to eat it if you don't like it, but if you don't like it, don't eat it. No need any carcass, and this is kind of coming back to what I was talking about, kosher shechita. To eat an animal or a bird, it needs to have kosher shechita. If it doesn't, we use the word treif. We throw around the word treif for non-kosher food. The word treif is actually a reference to one of 18 problems, medical type problems in an animal or in a bird that would not allow the animal to survive for 12 months. That is what a treif really is. So if it has got a hole in the lung, or it's got something wrong with its kidneys, and there's chapters in Gemara and Chulin that discusses exactly what these treifas are. Elu treifas goes through all of the different specific treifa things. We use this word for anything that's not kosher. And then colloquially that makes sense, but an actual treifa is an animal that has got one of these deficiencies that would not allow it to live for 12 months. An animal that hasn't had shechita, that hasn't been killed properly, or let's just say it's being in an abattoir being shechted properly, but something goes wrong. It still dies, but there was something wrong. They found a nick in the knife afterwards. And they said, okay, that animal now is not kosher. That animal, or you find an animal on the side of the road, or you go to your local supermarket and you buy non-kosher meat. That animal is not called treif, that's called nevela. A nevela is an animal that died on the street, so to speak. It died without proper shechita, without shechita at all, whether it was, let's call it roadkill, or whether it was slaughtered with a bolt in its head and then its throat was cut, or whatever. It's a nevela. A nevela is an animal that is not allowed to be eaten, and it actually makes a person impure. So we talk about tuma and tahara, impurity and purity. By eating nevela, it makes a person impure. Now, we are all ritually impure anyway. We are all considered ritually impure at the highest level of having been in contact with a human body. But so you can't become more impure than that. But you don't want to put more different impurities into yourself, so refrain from coming in contact with those kind of animals.
Treif and treva?
Treva means to pull out those parts of the animal that we can't eat. So the gid hanashe, the femoral nerve in the thigh, which is why we don't generally, as Ashkenazim, we generally don't eat the hind quarter, because we don't have the ability to pull that out. That comes back to Yaakov Avinu, when he fought with the angel injured his hip socket. And so the Torah there says that we're not allowed to eat the hind quarter. It reiterates it later on as well. But there are certainly people who are able to trever an animal and pull that out. In fact, the Daf Yomi right now, we're learning Chulin, and that's the chapter we're learning right now is Gid Hanashe, about that femoral nerve. And what's allowed, what's not allowed, whether you can or can't take it out, how you take it out, etc. How much needs to be taken out. But that's why we generally, as Ashkenazim, wouldn't eat rump steak and sirloin and those cuts of meat, because we generally don't take that part of the animal out. If we knew how, we were able to take it out properly, then those cuts of meat would be okay. But what we would normally do in most Western countries is slaughter the animal and sell off the hind quarter to the people in the slaughterhouse, because we usually just buy place in that slaughterhouse, and so we kind of share the animal. And then finally, the Torah ends that section by saying, for the third time, Lo tevashel gedi b'chalev imoy, do not boil a kid goat in its mother's milk. And the Torah says that 3 times. All the halachas of meat and milk are learnt out from that verse. We're not allowed to cook meat and milk. We're not allowed to eat meat and milk together, and we're not allowed to get benefit from meat and milk that was cooked together. So it's mentioned 3 times for that reason. then the Torah changed tack, and Moshe Rabbeinu starts talking about tithing. He says, "Aseh ta'aseh," you shall surely tithe, and this is talking about the second tithe, Ma'aser Sheni. So we have to, when we grow produce in Israel, we have to give a small amount to the Kohen, 10% to the Levi. The Levi gives 10% to the Kohen of what he gets. So that's Truma goes to the Kohen, Maaser goes to Levi, it's called Maaser Rishon, and then Trumas Maaser, the Levi takes off 10% and gives that to the Kohen. So the Kohen gets about 2% in Truma, the Levi gets about 9.8%. In Maaser, he gives 1% or 0.98% to the Kohen. The next 10% is Maaser Sheni. And Maaser Sheni in the 7-year cycle of the Shemitah, I've got up there the 3-year cycle because it's two 3-year cycles plus the 7th year makes up the whole 7-year Shemitah cycle. So in years 1, 2, 4, and 5, Maaser Sheni is taken, 10%, and taken up to Yerushalayim, to the place that Hashem will show you, and is eaten in Yerushalayim. Now, obviously, if a farmer has got a massive crop and he needs to take 10% of it, and is not going to survive until he goes up to Yerushalayim the next time because it's going to rot, he can redeem that and then take the money to Yerushalayim and buy food and drink in Yerushalayim and eat it there. In the 3rd and 6th year of the cycle, he takes that 10% and instead of taking it to Yerushalayim and eating in Yerushalayim, it's given to poor people, to the Levi, to poor people, to those who haven't got. That's called Maaser Ani. And so that's how that 7-year cycle works. The 7th year is Shemitah, nothing happens. Years 1, 2, 4, and 5 is taken to Yerushalayim. Years 3 and 6 is given to poor people. And the Torah reiterates, Aser ta'aser, make sure you tithe. You shall surely tithe. And it's the one thing on the flip side, in terms of giving tzedakah, giving charity, the Navi says this is the only time you can test Hashem. Give and you will get back. That is the one time you can test Hashem. Don't test Hashem in other areas. But if you give, firstly, if you give of something, that's what you'll keep forever. That's what you take with you to the next world. What you keep for yourself in this world goes into the grave, goes to the kids to get lost. I saw there was an article I saw yesterday about the Grollo family and how the grandfather built a business, the father grew the business, and the son has killed the business, the grandson.
To take us
fortune
to turn it into a small one.
Yeah, and that seems to be what has happened. Now, I don't know the details of that, but it was just an interesting connection. What you want to take with you to the next world is what you give away in this world, and those mitzvahs you do, the chesed you do, the kindness you do. Any good thing you do, you'll take with you. Anything you waste money on in this world, well, it's gone. It's just nothing. And, rather give away what you can, and then you can take it with you. There are rules, not for now, but there are specific rules on what you're allowed to give, what you're not allowed to give. Don't give too much because you don't want to leave yourself destitute. But there are rules that you give 10% or you can give 20% of whatever earnings you have. And it's a good practice to do those kind of things because then you are accustoming yourself to be a giver. The more we give, the more we become a giver in everything in life.
I don't want to forget because I'm getting old. Is a chicken a bird or?
Chicken's a bird.
It's
yes.
a bird.
Yes.
It's not termed as.
Yeah. So in terms of animals, there's slight differences between animals, being cows, oxen, sheep, goats, deer, are slightly different. So there's 3 categories. You get what we call behemoth, which is cows, sheep, and goats. You get what we call chaya, which is wild animals like antelope, giraffe, all those type of animals. They are all kosher. And you get fowl, being chickens, geese, ducks, turkeys. Those are birds. So there's slightly different rules for all of them. Interestingly enough, if a person slaughters a chaya, an antelope, to eat, or a chicken, the blood, one of the halachas is the blood needs to be covered. So there is a process in the slaughtering process where they actually will slaughter the chicken and then say a bracha and cover over what blood comes out of the animal with dirt from the floor as part of the process. In terms of meat and milk, for example, it's not at the exact same level because chickens and ducks and geese don't bear their young live. They come from eggs. But rabbinically, it's exactly the same. So we treat chicken the same way. There is a way, if somebody has a problem with meat and milk in their kitchen by mistake, some milk splashes on a chicken dish versus a meat dish, there's a leniency that can be brought in sometimes with fowl because it is at a rabbinic level as opposed to a pure Torah level. But from a normal course of business, everyday life, it's treated the same.
Can you eat the whole pot?
The chicken doesn't have any of those issues at all, yes. There is no, in fact, the Gemara a few days ago discussed why is a bird, it has the skid hanashe, but why it's not, because it doesn't have a cupped thigh. The thigh bone in a bird is different to an animal, and for that reason it's not the giranasha, and therefore you can eat all parts of the bird.
And what about ordinary meat? Does it also if some milk?
No, there's a problem. Anytime you have a problem with meat and milk, you need to ask a question of the rabbi. There's no question about that. It's just sometimes the rabbi will find more of a leniency with chicken than he will with regular meat. It just depends on the circumstances. But if there's ever a problem in a kitchen, always ask the rabbi, because there's many times that generally what happens is we tend to rule more strictly than we need to. And therefore we'll just chuck it out. You don't necessarily need to, but you need to know what to do.
And what's your thought on parava milk? A lot of people...
it's got a hechsher as far as I know.
Yeah, it does have
and
a
it's a parava hechsher. And
Some religious people say, well, just in case someone comes in and thinks it's milk.
So there's a Shulchan Aruch on that. The Shulchan Aruch says, the Shulchan Aruch was written in the 1500s. And the Shulchan Aruch says, if you've got almond milk, make sure you put almonds on the table next to it so people know that it's almond milk. And I'll tell you something more in more modern times. When margarine became parav, the first parav of margarines, if you ever went to a function, they always put the actual margarine tub on the table to show it as margarine, not butter, because that's Shulchan Aruch. So yes, once something becomes known, today they will put it in a silver dish and everybody knows it's margarine because it's parav. But once something becomes known, so this milk, I guess, we have got so many artificial milks at the moment. You walk into a supermarket, and you just see all these bottles of different kinds of non-milk milks. So I guess this is just another one.
Yeah, years ago when it first started, very religious people said that.
Yeah, you put the bottle on the table to show that that is what I'm drinking. So it's about maras ayin. It's about that somebody shouldn't get the wrong idea. That, oh, look, he's having a cheeseburger kind of thing.
Disclosure. Yeah,
that's full disclosure. Okay. The Torah then discusses remission of loans. At the end of part of the Shemitah process, Shemitah is leaving your fields fallow, but Shemitah is also, at the end of 7 years, all loans go away. If you loan something to somebody else, they do not need to repay the loan. Now, there's ways of getting around that in our times, since Gomorrah times and before that, where we can sign an agreement and you hand over your loans to the Beis Din. It's a very simple way of doing it every 7 years. But the Torah says, make sure that you don't take a loan and do not, at the end of 7 years, during Shemitah, in the Shemitah, all loans are wiped away. You do not need to repay them.
How wonderful for our mortgages.
It doesn't work with a mortgage because that's with a company and not with an individual. But yes, it can be. There's ways of doing it. But if you, it's to help people get by in life. It's all about helping people. In Shemitah, things change. There's differences in the way we do things. At the end of the day, the Torah says, if there's a destitute person around you, one of your brothers in your cities, in the land that Hashem, your God, gives you, is struggling, don't harden your heart, help them, be warm, open-hearted, make sure you give to those people who are struggling. Make sure you always open your hand and give to those who are less fortunate than yourselves. What happens if a person, jump to this one, a Jewish person, we learn about slaves, and the Torah talks a lot about an Eved Kanani, a non-Jewish slave. Now, obviously, that doesn't apply in our times, and this section here doesn't apply either directly anymore. But if a person is sold as a slave because they stole something, talking about a Jewish person who stole something, and they can't repay it. The Beis Din will sell them, and a person buys them. Or a person themselves needs to raise money. They have not got enough money, they can't live, so they sell themselves. A Jewish person can sell themselves for 6 years, and the 7th year they go free. However, taking on a slave, an Eved Ivri, as it's called, the Jewish slave, is a big burden on the owner of the slave, because the person is not really your slave. We need to remember that we were slaves in Egypt, and Hashem took us out of Egypt so that we would be His servants. I'll use a slightly different word, but if you have a slave, and you have, let's go back to my steak, you've got a nice big steak, but you've only got one, your servant gets it, you don't. You'll get to eat the whatever, the eggs, the millipap, okay. For those not South African, staple food of the black people in South Africa. Maize meal into like a porridge. If you've got a very comfortable, big, fluffy pillow and you've got an average other pillow, you take the average and your servant gets the big, fluffy one. If it's cold and you've got one blanket, servant gets the blanket, male or female servant. But for 6 years, yeah, but you have to work. It's not, yeah, it works both ways. At the end of 6 years, if he comes along and says, you know what, I love my master much more than I don't want to leave him, then you take him to the wall, to the doorpost, and you take an awl and you bore a hole into his ear. Because that's the ear that heard, as in the lobe of the ear, not, you don't make him deaf. You put a hole in his ear so that it can be seen that he did not listen to the voice of Hashem. He did not trust in Hashem. He thought his master was better than, greater than him. And so therefore we spoke about earrings and holes in the body. There is one time the Torah tells us that we have to do that. Okay, the Parsha ends with the 3 pilgrim festivals. This is the laning that we have. It's actually started from Aseh Taseh. Kol HaBechor is included in that. Sometimes it varies depending on which. This is the laning we have on the last days of Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz. So out of Israel, we read this Parsha of Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Observe the month of springtime, perform the Pesach offering to Hashem your God. The month of springtime, Hashem took you out of Egypt. Don't have any leaven. It goes through all the rules. Bring a Pesach offering. We'll count 7 weeks. After 7 weeks is going to be Shavuos. Shavuos is the festival of the beginning of the harvest. And then make the Sukkot festival for a 7-day period when you gather in from your threshing floor and from your wine vat. It goes through all 3 pilgrim festivals, just the pilgrim festivals, not the other Yomim Tovim. And other times in the Torah we go through Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, etc. Here it just mentions the 3 pilgrim festivals. And the Parsha ends Shalosh Pa'amim Bashana, 3 times a year. Yera'eh kol zechurcha es pnei Hashem Elokecha b'makam asher yivcha b'chag hamatzos v'chag hashuos v'chag hasukos v'lo yera'eh es pnei Hashem v'reikam. 3 times a year, your males will come to Hashem in the place that Hashem will choose. Festival of Matzos, Festival of Shavuos, and the Festival of Sukkot. Don't appear empty-handed. In other words, when you come to do Oile Regel, to go up on for the 3 pilgrim festivals, make sure you come with an offering. A Korban Chagiga is brought. And that's where we get the word Chag from. The Korban Chagiga comes from that. Bring a Korban Chagiga with you. Don't come to appear empty-handed before Hashem. And the Pasha ends, everyone according to what he can give, according to the blessing Hashem your God has given you. Make sure that you give. Be a giver. So kind of 2 themes that I've really focused on in the Pasha is this land that Hashem will show you, and make sure that you give and give and give.